And welcome to a look at the week that was. So we'll go ahead and close this here. Oops, not that. Let's go back here. Let's do this. Oh, by the way, forgot to mention in the last one, the here is the compound where Osama bin Laden was killed in Pakistan. And there's some of the information on it there after the fact, as we see here. And what's interesting about that is, go ahead and zoom out here. Excuse me. There we go. Get it kind of north-south. That's the mountain where the training was, and the dam where the training was. Osama bin Laden was right there just a few years later. And this is Afghanistan, and this is the border with Pakistan. So it just crossed over into Pakistan, and that's where he was later found. So yeah, so Pakistan has not been a friend. They've been very supportive and hospitable towards those folks. But that brings us to a fast forward to this week. So last from this last week, I want to share thoughts from this gentleman on the spiritual warfare that is going on. The gentleman's name is David Rutherford, and he's going to relate to Charlie Kirk here. So here is David Rutherford on spiritual warfare.
One of the things as I was contemplating, this show, I one of the things that really provoked it was there was a presentation that Charlie Kirk did with Tucker Carlson a while back, and where he talked specifically about it. And Jordy, why don't you play that whole thing, right? The clip I sent you right now.
Sure. Faith is the most important thing, because for those of us that are Christians, it doesn't drive you crazy. You actually see what's going on, which is that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and darkness and spirits, that there's a spiritual war here. And you're right, Tucker. I find people in this space that are not anchored to faith, anchored to Jesus, they do lose their mind. Because there is no rational or reasonable explanation for what the country is doing to itself or what we are experiencing. But if you then see and you know that there is a God and we are not him, that there is an entire dimension of angels and demons and spirits that are constantly struggling around us, and that there is a supernatural dimension, as you mentioned, all of a sudden, that doesn't make sense. It does not make any rational sense to shut down your schools so you can sacrifice the kids so the elderly can live. That makes no sense whatsoever. It makes no sense whatsoever to keep your marijuana dispensaries open and your alcohol shops open, but the church non-essential. Only a demonic enterprise would do such a thing. Only a demonic enterprise would say that Easter and Pentecost are non-essential, but race rioting and burning down a Wendy's is essential activity. And Tucker, you talk about this a lot. For those of us that know the truth, we know that our God is a God of order and distinction. What is the first thing that God did? In the Hebrew scriptures, it says, well, and also our scriptures in the original Genesis, Bereshith, which is in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then he separated and he made sense. He made order out of chaos. Our God is a God of order. And order only comes with distinctions. And distinctions are necessary. Think about all the distinctions that God set up in the first 6 books of Genesis that are currently under attack. The distinction between male and female. The distinction between man and nature. The distinction between the holy and the profane. The distinction between good and evil. The distinction between infant and adult. These distinctions have always been what Western civilization were built upon, but it is Satan's goal to blur and eventually destroy those distinctions, because those distinctions of which we get order, and if you do not have that order, then you have the closest thing to satanic chaos here.
All right. So you watch that, and he breaks it down in this really unique way, right? By these this idea of the war of principalities, darkness, and spirits. Now, I know a lot of times people will see people talk about demons and angels in that capacity, and they'll be like, hey, man, you just lost me there. Like, I get there's an attack on morality. I get that. I feel that. I mean, I'm appalled at what I'm seeing. But why are you able to describe it like that? And, I think when you begin to think about what principalities mean, right? Principalities are often understood in theology as a high-ranking spiritual beings or powers, usually fallen angels or demonic forces that rule over specific regions or areas of influence. Ephesians 6, verse 12 in the Bible talks about wrestling not just with flesh and blood, but with principalities, powers, and rulers in darkness. Now, theologians like Thomas Aquinas saw them as part of a hierarchy of angels, but when fallen, they opposed God's order, influencing human affairs and requiring spiritual resistance through prayer and faith. That's the core of it from a theological standpoint. So,
Pause there. With that, just the recognition, it's good to hear people talking publicly about spiritual warfare and that recognition. And I appreciate the point that's made is that what do those opposed to God go after? If God's a God of order, they're going after God's order and trying to turn the order back into chaos and confusion. And we certainly see that playing out. So let's see, that was from the 19th. Then here from the 23rd, we have this. I'm going to show a couple things from here, but right off the bat, notice this article here. Sorry, it's a little blurry. Article. We paid some Etsy witches to curse Charlie Kirk from an organization known as Jezebel. I know that sounds a little silly or a little out there, but check this out. I'm going to have two clips from this. And again, notice the public emphasis on spiritual warfare here. Start right about there.
Oh. She tells the reader she placed her first spell on Etsy, and it was, quote, in all caps, "Make everyone hate him." And she wondered aloud, how long would it take to kick in? The witch servicing Jezebel on Etsy contacted the writer and asked if she would like to, quote, amplify the energetic support of the spell for an extra $50. She did it. She goes on, for the powerful hex spell, I had to provide Kirk's date of birth for accuracy. The witch informed her that she, the witch, had performed the hex and that it was successful. Jezebel wanted to know when they were getting results on their curse. And while their article about all of this hit, it was published on Monday, September 8th, it makes clear that the writer contracted for the curse in late August. She says she wanted it to line up with the new moon in Virgo, which this year meant August 23rd. That tracks because she points out in the piece that by August 24th, she was waiting impatiently for results. The witch, they reveal, promised on August 23rd that, quote, you will see the first results within 2 to 3 weeks. This was 18 days before Charlie was killed.
So there's that. Then one final clip will start here. From this one right here. Right about there.
Amazon wants to ban this charger, but there's nothing they can do about it. Nobody believed me at first, but now everybody wants one.
Now, again, you may be saying to yourself, why are we talking about Etsy curses? None of this is real. Well, two things. First of all, Christians are opposed to casting spells or trying to contact the spirit world. Not only because they believe there's only one God, but because they acknowledge the existence of the devil and evil spirits. Here is Father Mike Schmidt. He was on the day Charlie died, helping us through that as well. But he came on our show first time a couple of years ago, and here he is discussing this very subject.
The motivation behind the Ouija board is actually something where I'm trying to contact spirits. And someone could say, well, I'm trying to contact nice spirits or good spirits. And the unfortunate thing we know about is that, yes, when God created angels, he created angels. They're good, they're beautiful, they're in harmony with him. But also we know that a number of those said no to God. A person who's reasonable would say, but I'm just playing. And I would say, I completely understand that. And then I would say, at the same time, you remember the movie The Exorcist?
Of course.
Yeah, how can you forget it? So that story is based off of two true stories. And one of the true stories is, I believe, about, if I get the details right, is about a young man who was at, kind of like a birthday party, some kind of celebration of some sort with kids. And they just busted out the Ouija board and just played for fun. But that was an entry point for what ultimately became a possession.
In other words, you're playing with fire, messing with this stuff. There actually are demons in this world. Calling up the spirit world, in particular the devil's spirit world, can actually have real world consequences. It's not something to mess with. Many Christians believe this. This is dangerous. It's not a game. It's literally evil. Second, this is what I really want you all and the people at Jezebel and Etsy to know. Erica and Charlie Kirk heard about these curses, and that news genuinely rattled Erica in particular. She knew Christian teaching on the subject. She loved Charlie, absolutely. And she was scared when she heard of the curses Jezebel had called up. So much so that she and Charlie contacted a friend, who I believe she said was a Catholic priest, but definitely a friend, and asked him to come over and pray with them over Charlie the night before he was murdered. She eventually worked it through, and so did Charlie. That, as she later told me, weapons will form but not prosper. That Satan and those witches have no power. Of course, God's will is the one that matters, and his blessing over Charlie was real and palpable. All you had to do was spend time with Charlie to know that.
Was there, so that's that one from recently. And again, that was just on the 23rd. And then lastly, from the 29th, 2 days ago. This one. I'm sorry, actually, I've got it already right here. So right here, a couple clips from this one, and then then one last thing for our look at the week. Let's see, 114, yeah. So here is the same gentleman we saw earlier, this time having that lady, Sarah Adams, the CIA person, on about things happening, bringing us to this week.
Aren't paying attention. What is your prediction right now? What do you think has been in planning, and what is on the precipice of taking place?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a prediction. If people are unaware, we've been running human networks into Al-Qaeda for a decade now. Of course, it was to identify the terrorists who attacked us in Benghazi. But since the fall of Kabul, a lot of those Libyans went to Afghanistan, right? So the interesting part is everybody's coming back together, the band's back together, and that's why we have the threat picture we have. So what we know about the plot, it's very, very large. They want to do 3 times the size of 9/11. It's very simple. They want to do another aviation plot, but this time their intent is to take down about a dozen airliners using suicide bombers. They want to do, it's kind of like a siege on DC is the best way to put it, very Mumbai style. And then the last piece, ISIS is going to kind of handle this piece. They want to have attacks where you live, work, and play. These are community level attacks. So we're talking churches, shopping centers, hospitals, and their focus is really on communities that have a higher percentage of a veteran population, because they want the veterans to feel in their hometowns what they felt in Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan. That's supposed to be the feel of that piece.
Interesting.
There's the next section right up here. There.
Part is the CIA got the assessment wrong that Hamza bin Laden is dead. So they told it to President Trump in his last term, and he announced it to the country. Well, now they don't want to go tell Trump, because he's obviously going to wipe out their whole department, which he should do, because, right, they're covering their own butts. They're not doing what's right for the American people. So we have a lot of hubris in the intelligence agency. We have a lot of people who are are protecting their turf. And remember, we have this frustrating piece that they're like, we just got to wait a few years. We wait this leader out, we get another leader, right? That's another thing you have to be really, really honest about. So it's going to be really hard to shift to Al Qaeda. It's very difficult to get anyone to say Al Qaeda. I think everybody kind of took this huge sigh of relief when Joe Kent's title said Al Qaeda. Like, it was like, oh my God, we haven't been able to get anyone to say Al Qaeda for like 4 years. Like, he brought almost like a lot of hope to the community. But they now need to get the rest of the IC on board, and we have not seen that happen yet.
So that's some of what the issues have been.
His military commission, it was Abdullah Maki. If you don't know him, we killed him in a strike in March in Iraq. So he was running that piece of the training pipeline, and he was actually connected to Jogger in New Orleans. So he ran Jogger's cell from Syria. Now then, there's a whole nother pipeline under Abu Muhammad al-Julani, the new president of Syria, and they're kind of like a lot of the HTS camps, and so they go through HTS's pipeline, and then they're deployed essentially from Syria by HTS. So it's really interesting. There's a number of senior leaders at the top, and the plot is approved by Al-Qaeda Shura and ISIS Shura. We've never had a plot like this ever to exist.
That were communicating in conjunction. It's almost like the aspiration of the Grand Caliphate is emerging, right? And
so the guy in New Orleans, New Year's, he was not a lone wolf. He was out coordinated through Syria, and they're all working together again for this global caliphate here.
Go-getters. Unfortunately, we started off, as you can imagine, a lot of people in law enforcement being like, well, is it going to happen in my town? What I like to say is, well, what percentage of your town is veterans, right? Like, that's where you start. Also, if it's going to go on for multiple days, potentially, well, are you going to get called to back up? How far away are these cities from you? Now, we don't know a lot of the cities. We know some of the states ISIS is focused on. And then the AQAP video has a few cities, but that doesn't mean that's where they'll be. But there's a lot of focus on Pennsylvania in this threat. A lot. If you are in any city in Pennsylvania, you should be prepared. And in my opinion, right?
Interesting that the veteran focused and Pennsylvania is high on the radar. Here.
That's the one plot that I think is the one that resonates with me. It's the one I'll never forget when Mumbai took place. You know, not that, you know, I'm praising the attack, but the tactics in that were the best I had ever seen, right? They were just 10 guys wreaking havoc, holding the city hostage for 58 hours or whatever it was. And if imagine that with, you know, in a smaller city of 250,000, 300,000 people, you know, a smaller police force, you know, not a lot of big government entities that can respond. You know, it's like that's the thing that is really the most alarming, in particular if people, like you're saying, had a year and a half of training and preparation and, you know, access to the other things, because a lot of things
right there. So again, Mumbai was a template for how they're going to do things over here. And then lastly, right here.
Now, especially with the veteran organizations in your town, know who they are, because we have a problem where the terrorists might dress as law enforcement. So now when you see this veteran you've never met, you know, well-trained, well-armed, he looks like law enforcement. Is he an attacker? Is he not? There's going to be a lot of confusion in this. So we're telling everyone, make all the relationships you can now, right? Bring community into it now, because you're in a better spot. Also, as you can imagine, let's say they hit the hospital, right? And then they do a second round. Well, now you can't use the hospital. Well, did you have conversation with the local schools, the local churches? Did you stockpile medical supplies elsewhere? Do you even have the blood levels where they need to be at the blood banks in your town? There are very, very simple things that will help in any emergency that people are not doing, and we need to get citizens involved, right? I get my house.
There. So that's the latest update on how things are looking for what will eventually be happening and things that can be done at the local level to shore up for that. And my last piece is this article here, just mentioning what's been happening lately in this year. Just in 2025, there have been 9 church attacks. Just going to mention them real quickly here. In Oklahoma, on April 3rd, man went in and shot the reverend who died at the hospital later. He wasn't happy with some of the reforms of the church. And May 6th, a man set an explosive device on the altar in Pennsylvania. And a video shows him running away from it 10 or 11 seconds before the explosion. That was back in May. The chapel just reopened this last week. Number 3, arson at a Portland church. A 45-year-old set fire to the doors of a Catholic church. And let's see, he's facing charges. The case remains underway. Number 4, check this out. Church security at Crosspoint Community Church in Wayne, Michigan shot dead. The church security shot dead a would-be assailant on June 22nd. Police identified the suspect as Brian Browning, 31. Browning reportedly swerved into the parking lot, got firearms out of the car, and approached the church. Church members locked the door and engaged Browning with gunfire, killing him. While Browning opened fire, he did not injure anyone. A churchgoer told the Detroit Free Press that the church had trained for such a situation, and thank God no one besides the shooter had been killed. Number 5, at a church event, a 15-year-old boy shot and killed another 15-year-old boy at St. Thomas More Catholic Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was at a community outreach event. Number 6, fire in Brooklyn. Brian Oviedo, 32, is charged with setting fire to 20 buildings in Brooklyn, including Church of St. Luke and St. Matthew. Number 7, Annunciation Church. Remember this one. Robert Westman, 23, opened fire at the Annunciation Catholic Church in Minneapolis, killed 2 children, injured 17 before taking his own life. And they were in prayer, first day of school. He identified as transgender. Number 8, September 17th, police in El Paso arrested a 35-year-old woman charged with arson against a place of worship, Beth El Bible Church. She placed a large bag against the outside wall of the church, set it on fire, and fled the scene. And the pastor saw it, was able to put it out. And in the bag, a paper plate with a hateful language inscribed on it. And then last one, of course, the most recent one on Sunday, Thomas Jacob Sanford, 40-year-old, drove his truck into the Mormon church there in Grand Blanc Township in Michigan, opened fire and set the church on fire, killed 4, injured 8 before he died in a gunfire exchange. So those are 9 events that happened just in 2025 so far related to churches. So that is what's been happening in this last week. It's pretty intense, but taking this in, reactions, thoughts, observations, or questions on any of this. Safe to say the spiritual warfare is real. It is real. It is happening. And so, but for me, one of the things I look to is the awareness and the presence of evil is, for me, is confirmation of the good of God and how right and true he is. And they are acting a little more desperate lately because they know their time is short. Revelation 12 talks about that with Satan. And so we know God's in control. We know he's got us. And we are not ignorant of Satan's schemes. And we can be prepared and assured by drawing close to him, drawing close to each other, and looking to his word for the guidance throughout these things. So that's the look at what's happened in this last week. So we'll go ahead and stop that share, and we'll close with an introduction